It was a bright Saturday afternoon and the public pool was buzzing with life. The sun was shining high in the sky, warming the concrete around the pool, making it almost hot enough to burn bare feet. The smell of chlorine mixed with sunscreen and the faint aroma of popcorn from a nearby food cart. Children were laughing, splashing water everywhere. Parents were chatting under umbrellas and lifeguards sat perched above the water, scanning the pool with vigilant eyes. The energy was lively, joyful, chaotic, and full of summer excitement. Aaliyah, a 13-year-old girl with an endless curiosity and boundless energy, was at the pool with some of her friends from school. She had been looking forward to this day all week. School had been stressful and the pool was her escape. The water felt like freedom to her, cool, weightless, and full of possibilities. She loved the way it carried her, how she could dive, spin, and float without any limits. She and her friends were near the deep end, laughing loudly as they challenged each other to races and who could hold their breath the longest. Aaliyah's braids bounced as she sprinted across the shallow area, her swimsuit splashing water onto anyone nearby. She was fearless, bold, and unafraid to make mistakes. That was her nature. Tyler, a young lifeguard on duty, was sitting atop his high chair, scanning the pool with a tight expression. He had been assigned the busy weekend shift and already by noon he felt worn out. The constant chatter, laughter, and splashing that others found fun had become overwhelming to him. He had a short temper that day, a sense of irritation he could not explain. Every bump, every splash outside the rules made him more tense. Aaliyah, in her excitement, didn't notice the small wave she had created with her jump splashing onto Tyler's chair. He flinched, a tight knot forming in his stomach, and muttered something under his breath. He was already feeling impatient. That little bump, harmless and accidental, ignited his frustration. Across the pool, hidden among families enjoying the sunny day, was someone who didn't belong in this ordinary scene. Dwayne Johnson, trying to enjoy a rare day off, was watching his own children play in the water. His sharp eyes, trained from years of discipline, scanned the pool with both attention and a sense of calm amusement. He wasn't looking for trouble, but he could sense when situations might escalate, even in a place like this. Aaliyah, oblivious to Tyler's growing irritation, laughed and tried to climb out of the pool with the help of the metal ladder. She reached the edge, water dripping down her face, hair clinging to her cheeks, and in the rush of excitement, she accidentally brushed against Tyler's arm. It was nothing intentional, just a casual bump from a child full of energy, but Tyler's irritation snapped into anger. He stood abruptly, his chair squeaking against the concrete. His face was red, his jaw tight, and his patience had run out. His mind, clouded by frustration, saw Aaliyah not as a child, but as someone who had disrespected him. He didn't pause to think, didn't consider that she was just being a kid. In that moment, he lost perspective. Aaliyah noticed the change in his expression instantly. There was a flicker of fear in her eyes. She had heard stories about lifeguards who sometimes overreacted, but she never imagined she would be on the receiving end. Her friends noticed too and exchanged worried glances. The laughter that had filled the air a second ago began to fade, replaced by a tense silence as the pool seemed to hold its breath. Without warning, Tyler reached out and grabbed Aaliyah by the arm. She gasped, trying to pull away, confused and frightened. "Hey, let go!" she shouted, her voice sharp, cutting through the background noise of splashing water. Her friends were yelling for him to stop, but in that moment, Tyler's anger drowned out everything else. With a sudden shove, he pushed her toward the deep end. The world seemed to tilt for Aaliyah. Water splashed into her face and she went under for a moment, struggling to regain control. Her heart pounded wildly, fear mixing with shock. She surfaced, coughing and sputtering, trying to understand what had just happened. Around her, the pool had gone quiet. Children stopped splashing, parents froze, and a few older teens whispered in shock. It was then that Dwayne Johnson stepped forward. He had been watching, his attention immediately drawn by the sudden movement and the sound of Aaliyah's panicked gasps. He didn't rush or shout. Instead, he moved with calm authority, the kind of presence that made people notice even without words. His eyes were on Tyler, but his focus also shifted to Aaliyah. He wanted to make sure she was okay first. Aaliyah, still wet and shaken, looked up at him. There was a sense of relief washing over her, like someone who knew she was in danger and had come to protect her. Dwayne crouched slightly, speaking softly but with confidence. "Are you okay?" he asked. His voice was gentle, steady, and reassuring. Aaliyah nodded, her hands trembling as she adjusted her wet swimsuit and wiped water from her face. Meanwhile, the crowd around them started murmuring. The parents, who had been watching from the edge of the pool, realized something serious had happened. Whispers spread quickly and people began to turn toward Tyler. Some were concerned, others were angry. But Dwayne's calm presence prevented the situation from spiraling out of control. Tyler, meanwhile, had started to realize that the shove had been witnessed. His anger wavered for a moment as he noticed the intensity of Dwayne's gaze. This was no ordinary observer. There was a weight in Dwayne's eyes that made him pause, a silent warning that his actions were being judged by someone who didn't tolerate abuse or carelessness. Aaliyah's friends had gathered around her by now, holding her towels, trying to comfort her. One of them whispered, "I can't believe he did that. I was so scared." Another added, "He shouldn't have pushed you." Their voices were filled with genuine concern, and Aaliyah felt a mixture of fear and gratitude. Fear for what had just happened, but gratitude that someone was there to make it right. Dwayne stood up slowly, making sure everyone was paying attention, not with aggression, but with clear authority. He approached Tyler and spoke directly, his voice calm but firm. "That's not how you treat kids," he said. Tyler flinched slightly at the tone, the firmness cutting through the tension. "Your job is to keep them safe, not scare or hurt them." The words hung in the air like a mirror, reflecting Tyler's mistake back at him. He shifted uncomfortably, realizing that the shove, which he had thought trivial in the moment, was a serious misuse of power. The anger that had fueled him earlier began to fade, replaced by a rising sense of guilt and shame. For Aaliyah, the incident had been terrifying, but seeing Dwayne Johnson step in, calm, strong, and fair, made her feel protected. She realized that even when adults made mistakes, there were people who would step up to set things right. Her heart, still racing, began to slow as she listened to Dwayne speak, his words resonating with a sense of justice she could understand even at 13. Parents and onlookers started to speak up as well. "That wasn't right," one parent said. "He shouldn't treat kids that way." Another added, "She's just a child. This is unacceptable." The momentum was building, and it became clear that Tyler's behavior was no longer tolerated by the crowd. The community, united in their concern for Aaliyah, had been galvanized by Dwayne's calm but firm intervention. By now, Aaliyah had regained her balance, still wet, still trembling, but no longer paralyzed with fear. She looked around at her friends, at the concerned parents, and then at Dwayne. In that moment, she realized something important. Mistakes and unfair treatment could happen anywhere, but standing up for what's right and having someone to intervene made a huge difference. Tyler, seeing the collective disapproval and the authority in Dwayne's presence, began to shrink back, his anger replaced by remorse. He didn't yet know how this day would change him, but the impact of his actions, witnessed by so many and addressed by someone like Dwayne, was undeniable. The pool, once full of laughter and carefree fun, had briefly been a place of tension and fear, but the intervention, the calm authority, and the care for Aaliyah had turned it into a lesson. A living reminder of the importance of safety, respect, and accountability. And for Aaliyah, the day that started as just another fun afternoon by the pool had already become unforgettable, marking the beginning of a story she would carry with her for years. The moment Aaliyah hit the water, the laughter of the pool vanished like it had been swallowed by the deep end. A loud splash echoed, followed by a sharp gasp from her. For a second, everything seemed to freeze. Children stopped playing mid-splash, parents paused, and even the food vendor near the pool stopped scooping popcorn, eyes drawn toward the unfolding scene. Aaliyah surfaced, coughing and spluttering, water running down her face and into her eyes, her heart pounding like a drum. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Her friends, standing at the edge, were shocked. "Are you okay?" One of them shouted, rushing forward. Another grabbed a towel and tried to wrap it around her, trembling fingers brushing wet hair from her face. Aaliyah's hands shook as she wiped the water from her eyes, trying to understand why Tyler, the lifeguard, had done that. She had bumped him accidentally, nothing more, but the shove had felt deliberate, almost angry. Her confusion quickly mixed with fear. From the lifeguard chair, Tyler leaned back, chest heaving. He had expected perhaps a brief scolding, a small acknowledgement of his frustration, but the instant panic on Aaliyah's face was not what he had anticipated. A small part of him realized he had gone too far. but his pride and irritation still fought for control. He glanced at the crowd now staring at him, the whispers of parents and children like needles in his conscience. Across the pool, Dwayne Johnson's attention never wavered. He had moved closer, his presence calm but authoritative, the kind of presence that makes people notice and listen without yelling or raising a hand. He didn't want to escalate the situation further, but he also wouldn't allow it to be ignored. Children and adults alike seemed to instinctively step back, sensing that someone important was taking control, not through force but through composure. "Hey," Dwayne said, his voice steady but carrying weight. "Are you okay?" His gaze shifted to Aaliyah. She nodded, though her eyes were wide and filled with shock. He crouched slightly, keeping his voice soft and friendly, yet firm enough that everyone around could hear. "Take a deep breath. It's okay. I've got you." Aaliyah felt a rush of relief wash over her. Despite the fear that had struck her moments ago, the concern in Dwayne's voice made her feel safe. He wasn't just speaking to her. He was making sure the entire environment around her reflected care and attention. For a 13-year-old girl, that feeling was powerful. It reminded her that not everyone reacts with anger or neglect. Some people notice when a child is in distress, and some take the time to make things right. Tyler, sensing the shift in attention, straightened in his chair. The pool crowd had gone silent, all eyes on him. He realized that the small shove he had thought inconsequential was now under scrutiny. Dwayne's calm authority carried a weight that Tyler couldn't ignore. For the first time that day, he felt the creeping shame of knowing he had crossed a line. "Your job," Dwayne continued, addressing Tyler directly now, "is to make sure kids are safe, not to scare them or push them into the water. You need to understand the responsibility you have." His tone was firm, without a hint of anger, but it carried the unmistakable authority of someone who wouldn't allow excuses. Tyler opened his mouth to respond, trying to justify his action. It was just a little push. I didn't," Dwayne cut him off, shaking his head slowly. "No, it's not just a little push. You have to think about what could happen. This girl could have gotten hurt. Your anger doesn't give you the right to put someone else at risk. And when you have a position of authority, your choices matter even more." The words struck Tyler. He realized that this wasn't about him anymore. It was about Aaliyah's safety and well-being. He felt a tight knot in his stomach, the guilt beginning to overwhelm the irritation that had dominated his morning. Around him, whispers grew louder. Parents nodded in agreement, children looked on with wide eyes, and some teens shook their heads in disbelief. The weight of collective disapproval was inescapable. Meanwhile, Aaliyah's friends hovered close. One whispered, "I can't believe he did that to you." Another added, "I was so scared." They were trying to comfort her, but the words also reinforced to Aaliyah that she hadn't done anything wrong. The fear she had felt started to mix with a growing sense of courage. She realized that this wasn't her fault, and the support from her friends and Dwayne helped her stand a little taller, her back a little straighter. Dwayne didn't just focus on Tyler. He also addressed the crowd, not to shame them, but to reinforce the lesson. "Everyone here has a responsibility to watch out for each other," he said. "We need to make sure this is a safe place. That means speaking up when something isn't right and making sure no one is hurt because of someone else's anger or carelessness." Parents nodded in agreement. Some began quietly talking to each other about pool safety and the importance of respectful behavior. Children who had been frightened now looked around with curiosity, seeing the adult world react to a mistake, and understanding that even when someone powerful does something wrong, accountability is possible. Aaliyah, though still trembling slightly, looked at Dwayne and whispered, "Thank you." He smiled, giving her a reassuring nod. "You're brave," he said. "It's not easy to handle something like that, but you did." Tyler, on the other hand, was fidgeting in his chair, realizing that there was no easy way to recover from what had happened. The crowd's attention was still on him, and he could feel the gravity of the situation pressing down. He didn't like feeling exposed or judged, but deep down he knew he deserved it. His role as a lifeguard was meant to protect, not intimidate or harm, and he had failed in that moment. The atmosphere around the pool began to change. The tension remained, but it was no longer just fear, it was awareness. People were paying attention, noticing how actions had consequences. Dwayne's presence had turned a potentially chaotic scene into a moment of clarity. Everyone knew something serious had happened, and everyone could see that accountability was necessary. Aaliyah's heart began to slow as she wrapped herself in a towel, her friends holding the edges and laughing nervously to try to lighten the mood. She was still scared, but she also felt empowered. The fact that someone like Dwayne had noticed, someone who could command attention without raising a voice, gave her a sense of reassurance she had never felt before. Tyler finally spoke, his voice low and uncertain. I didn't mean to," he began. But Dwayne didn't let him finish in a defensive tone. "It doesn't matter what you meant," he said. "It matters what you did. And what you did was wrong. Now you need to fix it. You need to apologize and make sure this doesn't happen again." Tyler swallowed hard, his pride wounded, but the words resonated. There was no escaping responsibility here. The confrontation wasn't just about shame. It was about understanding, reflection, and making amends. He nodded slowly, beginning to grasp the magnitude of his actions. Parents began stepping forward, some quietly speaking to Tyler about the seriousness of his behavior. "You have to be more careful," one parent said gently but firmly. "Kids are trusting you. You're supposed to keep them safe, not scare them." The words stung, but they also carried wisdom and truth. Tyler couldn't deny the validity of their concerns. Aaliyah's friends stayed close, offering small words of encouragement. "It's okay," one said. "He'll understand soon." Another added, "We're here with you." The support from her peers helped stabilize her emotions. She realized that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about facing fear and standing tall even when the world seemed unfair. Dwayne, sensing the shift, stepped back slightly but kept his eyes on Tyler, making sure the lesson was being absorbed. "Remember," he said, addressing both Tyler and the crowd, "what happens here matters. How you treat each other matters. Safety, respect, and accountability are not optional. They are necessary." For Aaliyah, this moment became more than just about a push into the pool. It was a lesson in human behavior, in courage, and in the importance of having people who will stand up when things go wrong. She felt seen, heard, and supported in a way that left a lasting impression on her young mind. Tyler, now fully aware of the seriousness of his actions, began to feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had overstepped and he couldn't undo the shove. But he could learn from it, apologize, and ensure it never happened again. The presence of Dwayne and the attention of the community forced him to confront his mistakes, something he might not have done alone. By the time the initial shock began to fade, the pool had regained some of its rhythm. Children cautiously returned to playing, parents continued their conversations, and the vendors resumed their work. Yet a subtle shift remained in the air, a collective understanding that actions have consequences, and that sometimes accountability can happen in a calm and constructive way, rather than with anger or chaos. Aaliyah, wrapped in her towel and surrounded by friends, felt a mixture of relief, pride, and lingering fear. But most importantly, she felt empowered. She had faced a situation that could have been humiliating or traumatizing, and she had come through it with support, validation, and a lesson that would stay with her. Dwayne Johnson, satisfied that Aaliyah was safe and that the situation had been addressed without further escalation, gave a small nod to her and her friends. "You're all okay," he said softly, "and that's what matters. Let's make sure this place stays safe for everyone." The incident, though brief, had become a defining moment. For Aaliyah, it was the day she realized that courage, support, and accountability could turn fear into strength. For Tyler, it was the day he understood the real responsibility of his role. And for everyone around, it was a reminder that even in ordinary places, extraordinary lessons can happen when people choose to stand up for what's right. After the initial shock of the shove, the pool began to settle into an uneasy calm. Children cautiously returned to the shallow end. Parents resumed conversations, but with a sharper awareness, and even the birds overhead seemed quieter, as if sensing the tension. Aaliyah stood wrapped in her towel, her wet hair sticking to her cheeks, trying to calm her racing heart. The memory of suddenly hitting the water and the panic that followed was still vivid, and she could feel her hands trembling slightly. Dwayne Johnson stayed nearby, his presence steady and reassuring. He hadn't left her side, making sure she was okay while also keeping an eye on Tyler. The lifeguard had slumped slightly in his chair, avoiding eye contact, as if hoping the moment would simply disappear. But Dwayne knew that ignoring the problem would only make it worse. Accountability was necessary, and he was determined to ensure that Tyler understood the gravity of what had happened. "Tyler," Dwayne began, his voice calm but carrying undeniable authority. "Do you understand what just happened?" Tyler hesitated. He wanted to justify himself, to explain that he had been frustrated, that it was just a small incident, but Dwayne's steady gaze made it difficult to speak without honesty. I didn't mean to hurt her," he said finally, his voice low. Dwayne shook his head slowly. "It's not about intention. What matters is the action. You pushed a child into the pool, and she was scared. That's not acceptable. You are responsible for keeping everyone safe, not for lashing out because of your mood." Tyler's chest tightened. He felt a pang of shame, a sudden clarity about what he had done. He had acted without thinking, letting his irritation dictate his behavior. He had failed in his role, and now everyone around him was aware. The parents' eyes were fixed on him. The children whispered to each other, and the weight of Dwayne's calm, firm presence pressed down on him. Aaliyah's friends gathered around her, their faces a mix of concern and relief. "Are you okay?" one asked again, softly this time, trying not to frighten her further. Another added, "He shouldn't have done that. I was so scared." Their words reminded Aaliyah that she hadn't done anything wrong, and that the blame lay entirely with Tyler. For the first time, she felt the beginnings of courage rising within her, a sense that she could face this moment without feeling powerless. Dwayne turned his attention slightly to the parents who had gathered at the edge of the pool. "This is a moment for all of us to reflect," he said. "We have to make sure kids are safe. That means paying attention, speaking up, and holding people accountable when necessary. It's not enough to just watch. Action matters." The crowd murmured in agreement. Parents nodded, some exchanging glances that conveyed a shared understanding. It was clear that everyone recognized the seriousness of what had occurred. Dwayne's calm and measured approach had transformed the tense atmosphere into one of reflection and awareness. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. He had been expecting anger, maybe yelling, but not this quiet, unwavering judgment. Dwayne's words cut deeper than a raised voice ever could. "I understand," Tyler said quietly, almost to himself. I see that I was wrong." "Good," Dwayne replied. "Recognizing it is the first step, but acknowledgement isn't enough. You need to make it right. Apologize to her and make sure this never happens again. That's how you show real responsibility." Tyler swallowed hard, the lump in his throat making it difficult to speak. He looked at Aaliyah, who was still clutching her towel, her eyes wide but steady. "Aaliyah," he said finally, his voice shaky. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pushed you. It was wrong, and I understand that now." Aaliyah hesitated for a moment, unsure how to respond. Her emotions were still raw: fear, confusion, and a hint of lingering anger, but she saw the genuine remorse in his eyes. Slowly she nodded. "Okay," she said softly, her voice quiet but firm. "Just don't do it again." The tension in the air began to ease slightly, but Dwayne knew the lesson wasn't over yet. He took a few steps closer to Tyler, speaking in a voice that was gentle but insistent. "It's not just about today," he said. "It's about understanding your role. Being a lifeguard is about trust. Kids trust you to keep them safe. Parents trust you. That trust is earned, and it can be lost in an instant if you let anger take control. Do you see that?" Tyler nodded, the weight of the word sinking in. "Yes," he said. "I see that now." Dwayne glanced back at Aaliyah and her friends. "You all did the right thing by staying calm and supporting each other," he said. "It's not easy to face something like this, but you showed courage and resilience. That's important." Aaliyah felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She had been scared, yes, but she had also stayed composed, looked for help, and accepted support. The moment that could have been humiliating had turned into something empowering. She realized that bravery wasn't about never being afraid. It was about facing fear and finding support when you need it. Tyler's gaze dropped to the ground, shame mixing with reflection. He had been defensive at first, but seeing the courage in Aaliyah and the calm authority of Dwayne made him think deeply. He realized that anger was never an excuse for hurting someone else, and that responsibility wasn't just about rules. It was about human decency. The parents who had been watching nodded in approval. Some quietly spoke to each other, noting how important it was to address these moments in a constructive way. One mother said, "I'm glad someone stepped in before this got worse. It could have ended badly." Another added, "Kids need to see that adults take responsibility, not just punish but teach and guide." The scene at the pool had become more than just an incident. It was a lesson in accountability, empathy, and courage. For everyone present, the push into the pool had sparked reflection on how small moments could have big consequences and how choosing the right response mattered. Aaliyah's friends stayed close, offering small gestures of comfort, a hand on the shoulder, a shared towel, whispered words of encouragement. Their support reminded her that she was not alone, that she had allies who cared about her well-being. That solidarity gave her strength, reinforcing the lesson that community matters, especially when facing unfair treatment. Dwayne stepped back slightly, keeping an eye on Tyler. "Remember," he said, "this isn't about shame. It's about learning and growth. You made a mistake, and now you have a chance to do better. That's what matters most." Tyler took a deep breath, nodding slowly. He realized that this was indeed a chance to understand his role better, to correct his behavior, and to rebuild trust with those he was supposed to protect. The incident would remain a reminder of how quickly things could go wrong when frustration took over, but it could also be a turning point if he chose to learn from it. Meanwhile, Aaliyah wrapped her towel more tightly around herself, feeling a mix of lingering fear and growing confidence. She understood now that mistakes happen, that people sometimes act out of frustration, but that standing up, seeking support, and allowing others to intervene could turn a frightening experience into a meaningful lesson. The atmosphere at the pool began to return to a calmer, more attentive energy. Children resumed playing, though with a little more caution. Parents continued their conversations, but now with a deeper awareness of the importance of safety and respect. Even Tyler, though visibly shaken, returned to his duties with a renewed understanding of his responsibilities. Dwayne stayed a little longer, making sure Aaliyah was fully settled and that the environment remained safe. He offered a few more words of encouragement, speaking to both the children and the adults present. "Safety and respect go hand in hand," he said. "And everyone here has a role in making sure both are upheld." For Aaliyah, the day had already transformed. What began as an ordinary Saturday at the pool had become an unforgettable lesson in courage, accountability, and the power of standing up for what's right. She realized that even when someone misused their power, there were people who would step in to protect and guide, turning fear into understanding and empowerment. As she watched Tyler carefully observing the pool, a small smile crept onto her face. She knew that the lifeguard had learned something important today. She also knew that she had grown stronger, braver, and more aware of her own courage. The memory of the shove would remain, but it would now be accompanied by the memory of support, intervention, and the presence of someone who cared enough to make things right. The pool slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the atmosphere remained different. The laughter and splashing continued, yet there was a new sense of awareness in the air. Children were still excited, but they watched more carefully. Parents stayed closer to their kids, and the lifeguards seemed more alert, aware of the eyes of everyone around them. The incident with Aaliyah had left a mark, not only on those directly involved but on everyone present that afternoon. Aaliyah, wrapped in her towel, felt a mixture of relief and lingering tension. Her friends stayed close, chattering softly among themselves, and she realized how much she had relied on their support. Without them, the moment might have felt overwhelming, maybe even humiliating. But with their encouragement and the calm, commanding presence of Dwayne Johnson, she felt a growing sense of empowerment. She understood that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting despite it. Tyler, the lifeguard, had stepped down from his chair at Dwayne's suggestion. He was instructed to take a break and reflect on what had happened, away from the public eye for a few minutes. Sitting on a bench under the shade of a small umbrella, Tyler ran his hands over his face and took a deep breath. The adrenaline of anger had faded, replaced by a gnawing guilt. The voices of the parents, Dwayne, and even the whispers of children replayed in his mind. Every word reminded him that he had failed in a role that demanded responsibility, care, and patience. The pool manager, alerted by Dwayne's intervention, approached Tyler quietly. "We need to address what happened," she said, softly but firmly. "This isn't about punishment only, it's about making sure you understand the impact of your actions and ensuring this never happens again." Tyler nodded, unable to meet her eyes but willing to listen. Dwayne, meanwhile, checked on Aaliyah once more. "Are you feeling okay?" he asked. She nodded, though her voice was still quiet. "I am," she said. I think I'm okay now." He smiled gently. "Good. You were brave, and you handled that very well. Not everyone can stay composed in moments like this, but you did. That matters." Aaliyah's chest swelled slightly with pride. She had been terrified moments ago, but now she understood that facing fear and receiving support didn't make her weak. It made her stronger. The validation from someone she admired, someone calm and fair, left a lasting impression. She realized that speaking up, being honest about what happened, and allowing trusted adults to intervene could turn a frightening experience into a lesson. Tyler had been asked to apologize to Aaliyah personally, and now the moment had come. He walked slowly toward her, hands slightly trembling. The pool seemed to hold its breath again, the children and parents watching the scene unfold. Tyler knelt slightly to meet Aaliyah at eye level, a gesture meant to show sincerity. "Aaliyah," he said quietly, "I want to apologize again. I acted out of anger, and that was wrong. I didn't think about how you would feel. I'm truly sorry." Aaliyah's eyes softened. She could see the genuine remorse in his expression. She nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "Just, please be more careful next time. Kids shouldn't be scared by the people who are supposed to keep them safe." Tyler nodded solemnly. "I understand," he said. "I promise I'll do better." The moment of reconciliation was simple but significant. It wasn't about dramatics or spectacle. It was about accountability, reflection, and learning. Aaliyah felt a sense of closure, and Tyler began to internalize the lesson that would guide his behavior moving forward. The crowd, sensing the resolution, murmured approval. Parents whispered to each other about how important it was to guide children safely and teach responsibility to adults entrusted with care. Afterward, Tyler was asked to undergo additional training in safety, sensitivity, and handling conflicts calmly. He accepted without complaint, realizing that this was a chance to grow. He spent the next hour reviewing protocols, discussing how to manage stress, and understanding how even small acts of frustration could have serious consequences. The lessons were hard, but necessary. He knew he had a long way to go in earning back trust, not only from Aaliyah but from everyone who witnessed the incident. Meanwhile, Aaliyah spent time with her friends, retelling parts of the incident in her own words. They laughed nervously at some of the chaos, but they also discussed how lucky she had been that Dwayne had intervened. The conversation turned into reflections about fairness, bravery, and the responsibility of adults. "I think he really learned his lesson," one friend said. "Yeah," another agreed. "And I think we can feel safer now knowing people notice when something is wrong." Dwayne Johnson stayed nearby, observing quietly. He didn't need to lecture or command attention anymore. His job was done for now. The presence of accountability, sincere apologies, and reflection had already transformed the environment. Children could play safely again, parents could relax while remaining attentive, and the lifeguard had a clear lesson he would not forget. Aaliyah, watching Tyler in the distance, felt a mixture of compassion and resolve. She understood that everyone makes mistakes, and sometimes adults do too. But the difference was whether they were willing to learn and correct their actions. She realized that her courage, combined with support from others, had not only protected her, but also helped teach an important lesson about accountability. The pool gradually regained its usual energy. Children splashed with renewed joy, parents chatted and laughed more freely, and even the lifeguards returned to their posts with a stronger sense of purpose. The day that had begun as ordinary had turned extraordinary, not because of fear or conflict, but because of the lessons learned and the way people responded with care, respect, and attention. Dwayne approached Aaliyah one last time before leaving. "Remember what happened today," he said softly. "It's a lesson you'll carry, not just about fear, but about courage, support, and the power of doing the right thing. You showed strength, and that's something to be proud of." Aaliyah smiled, feeling warmth and confidence. "Thank you," she said simply. "I won't forget this." Tyler, watching from a distance, felt a deep sense of responsibility. The incident had humbled him, but it had also given him an opportunity to change. He knew that his role was about more than rules or authority. It was about care, respect, and protecting those who relied on him. That realization would guide him every time he returned to the pool. As the afternoon sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the pool deck, the atmosphere settled into a calm, peaceful rhythm. Children continued to play, laughter returned, and families enjoyed the remaining hours of daylight. The incident that could have left lasting fear instead became a moment of growth, reflection, and empowerment for everyone involved. Aaliyah and her friends stayed until closing, enjoying the water, the sunshine, and the simple joy of being together. She felt a sense of pride that she had faced fear and had been brave, supported, and seen. The day had shown her that even difficult experiences could be transformed into lessons about courage, responsibility, and the importance of standing up for what is right. Tyler returned to his duties with renewed focus. The memory of the incident stayed with him, a constant reminder of the importance of patience, attentiveness, and respect. He understood that authority came with responsibility, and that a single moment of frustration could have serious consequences. That awareness would guide him for the rest of his career, shaping the way he interacted with children and families. For Dwayne Johnson, the day had been a reminder of the impact one person can have by noticing, intervening, and guiding responsibly. His presence had helped prevent harm, taught a valuable lesson, and restored a sense of safety and trust to the pool. It was a quiet but powerful demonstration that even small acts of awareness and intervention could create meaningful change. By the time the pool closed, the incident had been resolved in a way that emphasized growth, learning, and accountability. Everyone involved, Aaliyah, her friends, Tyler, parents, and even casual onlookers, had witnessed the importance of reflection, apology, and support. The lessons were clear. Mistakes can happen, but courage, responsibility, and human kindness can transform those moments into opportunities for learning and growth. Aaliyah left the pool holding her towel tightly, feeling lighter than she had earlier in the day. She knew she had faced a difficult situation, but she also knew she had been brave, supported, and seen. The confidence she gained that afternoon would stay with her, a quiet but powerful reminder that standing up for yourself and seeking help when needed could turn fear into strength. Tyler walked away with a thoughtful expression, the weight of the day pressing on him, but also a sense of purpose. He knew he had made a mistake, but he also knew he had been given the chance to learn and grow. The incident would shape his future, making him a more responsible, attentive, and compassionate lifeguard. And as the last children left the pool, the day ended not with fear or anger, but with lessons learned, courage recognized, and a sense of community strengthened by accountability and care. The week after the incident at the pool, life seemed to settle into a new rhythm for everyone involved, but the impact of that day lingered. Aaliyah woke up each morning with a sense of quiet pride. What had happened was still fresh in her mind, the memory of fear and surprise from the shove into the pool vivid, but it was no longer overwhelming. Instead, she remembered the courage she had shown, the support of her friends, and the way Dwayne Johnson had stepped in to ensure she was safe. That day had left her with more than just a memory. It had given her a lesson in bravery, responsibility, and standing up when something felt wrong. At school, Aaliyah shared pieces of her experience with her closest friends. They listened, wide-eyed, as she described the chaos at the pool, the fear she felt, and the calm authority of the man who intervened. Her story wasn't about seeking attention. It was about understanding the importance of courage, accountability, and human kindness. Her friends nodded, impressed not only by the events but by how she had handled herself. Some admitted that, if they had been in her shoes, they might have been frozen by fear. But she had faced the situation head-on, and that left a strong impression on them. Meanwhile, Tyler, the lifeguard, had returned to work after completing his training and reflection period. The extra lessons on patience, sensitivity, and handling stressful situations had changed his perspective. He approached his duties with a renewed sense of purpose, more attentive and calm than before. Every time he looked at the pool, he was reminded of how fragile safety could be, how trust could be broken in a moment, and how important it was to maintain composure no matter how frustrating a situation might become. Tyler had also taken the initiative to apologize more broadly. He spoke to other children who had witnessed the incident, explaining that he had made a mistake, that he had learned from it, and that he would do everything possible to ensure it wouldn't happen again. The children, reassured by his sincerity, slowly regained trust in him. The parents noticed the change as well, nodding quietly to themselves, recognizing that true accountability wasn't just about words, it was about consistent action. Aaliyah, returning to the pool a week later, felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. She had been hesitant at first, afraid that memories of the shove might return, but she reminded herself that she was braver now. Her friends were with her, chatting and laughing, helping her relax. As they approached the water, she noticed Tyler at his post, his posture calm and confident, eyes alert but kind. He smiled briefly when he saw her, a silent acknowledgement that lessons had been learned and trust had been rebuilt. The first moments in the pool were tentative. Aaliyah and her friends splashed lightly, testing the waters both literally and metaphorically. She felt the familiar rush of freedom, the weightlessness of water carrying her, but now it was accompanied by confidence. The fear of that previous week lingered only as a reminder, not as a shadow. She could enjoy the pool knowing she was safe, knowing that adults around her were attentive, and knowing that mistakes could be corrected when people acted responsibly. Dwayne Johnson's presence remained a strong memory in her mind. The calm and assertive way he had handled the situation had taught her an invaluable lesson, that courage combined with fairness and care could create powerful change. She often thought about how he had not yelled, not forced anyone, but had simply stood with authority and kindness. That example stayed with her, shaping how she approached not just the pool, but other challenging situations in life. As the days passed, Aaliyah began to notice small changes in herself. She was more confident when speaking up in class, more willing to defend her opinions, and more observant of when something seemed unfair or unsafe. The pool incident had given her a new sense of self-awareness, a realization that courage wasn't about being fearless, but about acting wisely and seeking support when necessary. She even shared some of these lessons with her friends, helping them see that speaking up could be a powerful tool for safety and fairness. Tyler continued his transformation as well. Each day he reminded himself of the lessons from that incident. He handled roughhousing children with patience, responded to complaints with calm listening rather than irritation, and paid closer attention to safety at every corner of the pool. Parents began noticing his changed demeanor, and slowly his reputation began to recover. The mistake he had made could not be erased, but he was determined to show through consistent action that he had learned and grown. At home, Aaliyah reflected on the broader lessons she had gained. She realized that human behavior could be unpredictable, that mistakes happen even when intentions are good, and that having the courage to face fear, seek support, and recognize accountability could turn difficult situations into learning opportunities. She thought about the power of community, the way her friends had supported her, the way other parents had spoken up, and the way one person's intervention could prevent harm. The experience had given her a perspective far beyond her years. The local community also took notice of the incident, discussing it quietly among parents and neighbors. It became a point of reflection about how children should be treated, how authority figures should act, and how accountability could be handled with calm, constructive guidance rather than anger or punishment alone. Pool safety meetings and discussions were held, not as blame sessions but as opportunities to strengthen community awareness. Tyler's commitment to improvement and the public acknowledgement of mistakes helped reinforce the importance of growth and responsibility. Aaliyah, walking to the pool on a sunny afternoon with her friends, noticed how different it felt compared to that first day. The air was filled with laughter, but this time she moved through it with a sense of control. She didn't feel small or vulnerable. She felt prepared. She had seen fear, experienced injustice, and witnessed courage in action. She had also seen accountability and the power of learning from mistakes. These lessons had changed her, shaping her perspective on fairness, bravery, and empathy. As she dipped into the water, she felt a rush of joy. The cool embrace of the pool was comforting, and each movement through the water reminded her of how far she had come in just a week. Her friends splashed beside her, laughter ringing through the air, a sound of genuine happiness and relief. This time, the pool was no longer a place of fear or anxiety. It was a place of fun, growth, and renewed confidence. Tyler watched from his post, alert but calm. He noticed the joy in the children's faces, the laughter of friends, and the sense of community thriving around him. The incident that had once been a moment of tension was now a catalyst for learning and improvement. He reminded himself that authority was not about control or fear. It was about care, attentiveness, and the responsibility to protect. Each day he aimed to live up to that understanding, proving through action that mistakes could be corrected and trust rebuilt. Aaliyah and her friends eventually left the pool, their hair dripping, towels wrapped around them, and smiles on their faces. They felt stronger, more aware, and more confident. The day that had started with fear and uncertainty had become a demonstration of growth, bravery, and the power of human kindness. Aaliyah knew that the lessons she had learned would stay with her for life. How to face fear, how to recognize when someone is in the wrong, how to seek support, and how to stand up for herself and others with courage and calm. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the pool deck, the atmosphere felt peaceful and reassuring. The lessons of the past week had transformed the environment. Children played safely, parents remained attentive, and authority figures like Tyler approached their roles with greater awareness and responsibility. The incident, once a source of fear, had become a turning point for everyone involved. Aaliyah, walking home with her friends, reflected on the journey she had experienced. She had faced fear, witnessed courage, and learned that mistakes, when addressed responsibly, could become powerful lessons. She realized that every person has the ability to make a positive impact by speaking up, by acting with fairness, and by showing care. She carried a newfound confidence, understanding that strength comes not from avoiding fear, but from facing it with courage and integrity. Tyler, reflecting on the week, knew that the incident would remain a lesson for him forever. He had learned the importance of patience, attentiveness, and accountability. He understood that his actions could affect lives, sometimes in profound ways, and that authority comes with responsibility. Every decision, no matter how small it seemed, could have consequences, and it was his duty to act with care, thoughtfulness, and empathy. The community around the pool had changed too. Awareness of safety, respect, and accountability had increased. Parents, children, and staff alike had learned that incidents, no matter how small, could be addressed constructively and thoughtfully. The event became a story of reflection, growth, and the importance of standing up for what's right. Lessons that would be remembered for years to come. Aaliyah, returning home that evening, felt a sense of pride and reassurance. The incident had challenged her, but she had faced it with courage. She had seen mistakes corrected, lessons learned, and people grow. The fear that had struck her a week ago was replaced by confidence, understanding, and a sense of empowerment. She knew that life would present challenges, but she also knew that courage, support, and accountability could guide her through them. The pool, once a simple place for fun, had become a classroom of life lessons, teaching bravery, responsibility, and empathy. For Aaliyah, Tyler, and everyone who witnessed the events, the experience was transformative. It had reminded them all that mistakes happen, but growth, courage, and kindness have the power to turn fear into strength, and challenges into lasting lessons. And as the sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving a warm glow over the city, Aaliyah carried with her a deep sense of resilience and understanding. She had faced fear, been supported, seen accountability, and learned the power of courage. That day at the pool was no longer just an incident. It had become a story of growth, bravery, and hope that she would carry forever.